In the early 20th century, the dominant movement in Hindi literature was Chayavad, a style of highly Sanskritized romantic poetry. It was a language of the elite, floating far above the brutal realities of the rural Indian landscape. The landless peasants, the marginalized castes, and the working women who made up the vast majority of the population were effectively invisible in the era's texts. Vaidyanath Mishra was born into this rural poverty in Bihar in 1911. Though a brilliant classical scholar, he lived as a disheveled, barefoot fakir, carrying his library down dusty village roads. The disconnect between the starving India he knew and the elite texts he studied pushed him to adopt the pen name Yatri, the traveler. He left home, searching for a deeper truth than classical tradition provided. His physical migration mirrored his intellectual restlessness, taking him from his home in Taroni to the intellectual centers of Varanasi and Calcutta. Surviving on charity and scholarships, he mastered ancient languages like Sanskrit and Pali, becoming an expert in the very classical forms he would later subvert. But he found the most guarded ancient wisdom inaccessible within India. To study the restricted Buddhist scriptures and manuscripts he sought, he realized he would have to leave the country. This nomadic pursuit took him across the sea, placing a classical scholar in the specific environment where his worldview would begin to shift. In 1935, he arrived at a monastery in Sri Lanka. He was there for the library, to gain access to guarded manuscripts that were closed to the outside world. To enter this world, he had to renounce his own. He became a Buddhist monk and took the name that would define his legacy, Nagarjun. But the monastery wasn't just a place of prayer. Inside, Nagarjun met revolutionaries from Calcutta fleeing the British colonial police. For the next 3 years, he lived a dual existence. He studied the Buddhist scriptures by day and absorbed the smuggled writings of Marx and Lenin by night. This collision of Buddhist compassion and revolutionary theory defined his priority for the rest of his life, a physical and intellectual oneness with the exploited. Returning to India in 1938, he immediately traded his monk's robes for the front lines of Swami Sahajananda's peasant uprisings. The scholar of ancient languages was now marching with the working class, facing beatings and arrests at the hands of landlord goons. He brought this radicalization into his writing. He began to intentionally drag Indian literature into the mud, writing in the raw Hindi and Maithili dialects of the fields. He utilized local rhythms and oral traditions to reach the masses, bypassing the gatekeepers of the academic world. He famously instructed young writers to make their metaphors wear slippers so the barefoot laborers could recognize their own lives in the verse. Groundbreaking novels like Paro and Bolchanma abandoned classical tropes, giving unvarnished agency to women and the lower castes. By utilizing the vocabulary of the street, Nagarjun expanded the audience of Indian literature to include the very people it was written about. After independence, he refused to align with official party bureaucracies, instead describing himself as an independent communist. He supported the armed peasant revolt at Naxalbari, viewing the outburst of rage as a necessary rebirth of the Indian Revolution. His most direct challenge to authority came in 1975, when he turned his pen against the Prime Minister's own power during the emergency. His poem, Induji, Induji, directly mocked her authoritarianism. It was a move that led to his arrest and 11 months of imprisonment. Attacking the highest levels of government at the cost of his own freedom earned him the title he is still remembered by, Janakavi, the people's poet. His life was defined by contradictions. He was an absentee husband who wrote about profound romance, and a state critic who later accepted national literary awards. But his influence stems from a life lived among the masses. He didn't just chronicle the struggle. He was a comrade present for the moments his mentor was beaten by landlord goons. Nagarjun's legacy is the proof that the most enduring poetry doesn't belong to the salons or the libraries. It lives in the streets, in the dirt, and in the struggle for justice.